Welcome to the How to Hire podcast. I'm your host, Matt Shore, CEO of StevenDouglas. Today, we will learn from a CEO and leadership coach how to create an optimal hiring environment that attracts and develops game-changing leaders that elevate the culture and success of any business. I'm so excited to be joined here today by my big brother, Howard Shore, who is my much older brother, I should say, who is an expert in developing great leaders and teams to build an organization in a way that engineers extraordinary outcomes. With a career spanning KPMG, Ryder Systems, AutoNation, and middle market private businesses, Howard brings a wealth of experience, having worked both as a senior executive and as a successful entrepreneur. So let's get into it a little bit. So welcome.
I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
This should be a lot of fun.
And definitely bigger brother. I don't know about that older thing.
Okay, so he's my bigger and much older brother, just to be clear, much older. So this is kind of a great one for me because, I get to learn from all these amazing executives that I bring in here for the podcast. And this happens to be somebody that's been mentoring me my entire life. So did I mention he was older? But Howard, maybe share, other than being my brother, maybe share a little bit about your journey from a business standpoint.
Well, and I have to give you credit too. I get it both ways, right? So I get to share and you always share with me. We learn from each other, which I think is really cool. So, what's really, when people look at these resumes, right? Great background, all that kind of stuff. I think it's important to go back and find out what's really behind the curtain. So if I were to estimate, or I would kind of describe in one sentence, my background, it's about being underestimated and having a chip on my shoulder to try to prove everybody wrong. It goes back all the way when I was young, dyslexia, sleep apnea, severe ADD, which you know about.
I did. Squirrel. Okay, sorry. I don't
right?
want to distract you.
And if you go all the way back into the early days, they tried to put me in special education. The only reason I didn't wind up in there was because of Mom. And it was Mom who challenged me that I could be a lot more and pushed me to kind of come out. So I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, and I think I see that in everyone in our family, including our brother David. We all have a little bit of a something to prove, right?
Yeah, man, you got that chip. And so when you look at the resumes, they're great. I'm super proud of, my first business was 18. I exited it when I was 21. But let's be honest, that was like a tough journey because I grew up in the family business, and I think I learned everything you're not supposed to learn about business in the family business. And then I didn't know any better, so I took it to my business, right?
I was younger, but my recollections are I wouldn't have wanted to work there. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I hated going to work. But so then I carried that in my own environment. Then I grew up in these Fortune 500 companies, and great companies, all of them, hands down. Externally, you look at them, leaders, and worked around great people, sharp people. And then, but when I looked around, you were basically getting half out of everybody. You knew the entire time I was in those companies, I was always looking for the next opportunity, even though they were awesome. And they built me. And then you take that over time. I'll still never forget the moment was when we brought in Gallup at Ryder. And then I found out the real truth about my leadership. And then I found out that only about a third of our workforce was fully engaged.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you get external feedback because you think you're doing all the right things, and you have all these learnings you had from public accounting and working there, and maybe it's not what you think it is.
Yeah, and so the validation though was as I looked around and I saw, I'm like, we're only getting half out of everybody, including me. Half the time people are like, I want more challenge. You're not giving me what I'm capable of. And now you could see it in numbers and like real numbers. And so for me, it fascinated me from that point on. I think it defined me that, God, how do we unlock the other 2/3? Because imagine what's possible with the same amount of people if we just really tapped into everyone.
So I guess we're moving into the phase here of why leave successful careers in finance and operations leadership to move into executive coaching and leadership development. Like what kind of prompted you to make the move and kind of take the leap and do something very entrepreneurial?
So what's interesting is And we're both coaches and consultants, right? And so I get to do both. And if you look at my career, I was essentially an internal consultant coach my entire journey. Very little of my career was, doing normal functions. It was changing divisions, doing mergers and acquisitions, restructuring the company, finding better financial models in the companies, challenging people. Everything I ever did, my entire career, whatever you gave me as a role, changed dramatically. And things because of that changed. So all I did was take what I was doing for one company, and because I get bored easy, as you know,
Right.
and I always like bigger challenges, I'm like, why can't I do it for like 20 companies at the same time? That'll be a lot more fun, a lot more challenging. And so that's all I did. To me, it was just a shift of what I was doing and then professionalizing it.
Got it. So you go into the market, you open a business, you start, you know, bringing in new clients in different industries, different size companies, and I'm sure along the way you started to see some different commonalities. And we'll talk about the things that kind of transcend different businesses and sizes of businesses. But along the way there, somewhere you decided to also write a book or two. And I think you had another one that's about to come out. So what prompted you to start writing?
So what's ironic for this, and we both struggle with the same thing. Both of us reading a book takes forever. If it takes somebody 6 hours to read a book, it takes us like at least 6 days.
Yeah, I'm pretty slow. I'm pretty
Yeah.
slow. to do
So
that.
it's kind of funny to think about me writing a book when it was so hard for me to read a book.
That's true.
But so it wasn't about the book. It was about scalability and organizing thoughts. So think about it. Now, over 40 years, I can't believe I'm saying that out loud. 40 years in businesses, running businesses, and doing all of that. That's a lot of things to think about and organize and want to share with people. So, what book writing did for me is it took all of those thoughts and organized it. And I actually use it as a reminder. I have to go back and read my own books
Right.
to remember what I was supposed to be sharing with everybody that I forgot to share.
So it's a framework that you can apply over and over again, that you're continually refining and
Correct.
enhancing as you're working with different clients, right?
Yeah, and then the other thing was, and like my current book is a good example. There's 5 to 10 books that make up the topics that I like in there that I've always liked over time. Who the hell wants to read 5 or 10 books? And most of those books were complicated and hard for people to get through. So it was also a way for me to summarize things in an actionable way. And so if you go from each book, Leaky Bucket was why we all need help.
Right.
15 leaks every business has. I don't care how big, how small. You have these leaks. The bigger, the worse they get. They don't go away. And so I'm like, so we had to highlight. Listen, don't believe your P&L. You're leaving a lot of money on the table,
Sure,
right?
sure. I think we all realize it at some point, but it's just kind of being able to pinpoint those things and see if you can address them, right? And let me backtrack for a second. So, how long ago did you shift into executive coaching and leadership development now?
We are getting very close to year 22 when I founded the firm.
And then you wrote the first book. How far into that with all those learnings from all those different environments you were in? Probably about a decade into it? The first
Almost
book?
15 years.
Okay.
It was funny. All of a sudden, I felt compelled because no matter how many businesses I looked at, it was all the same stuff. Different industry. It was like going to Baskin Robbins, and it's just ice cream, right? It's just a different flavor. And so that book highlighted that. And then the second book so what's the system to address all of this? How can we organize this and make it actionable? And then my last book was like a holy crap moment. Had 20 executive coaching calls with CEOs over 2 weeks, and we were essentially talking about the same things. It was just different. It was all about all the people stuff. It was engaging people, how they were working harder than they wanted, how they couldn't believe somebody wasn't reaching their potential. It was all people. And then I realized underneath all of this, what really helps us make money goes back to Gallup. All right. If we can just really tap into the people that are around us, holy cow, so much money will show up. And that's really what the next book's
Yeah, and it's part of why we started this podcast. Is the one thing that's common across every business is you need people to succeed and you need leadership to get kind of achieve the goals that you're setting out for yourself. Talk about some of the hardest truths that every leader must face at some point.
We are likely not half the leader we think we are.
Interesting. Okay.
And so what I mean by that, this is not an insult to anybody. I'm talking about people that are grown, $500 million businesses, people that on paper everything looks great. And see, the thing about success is it hides reality. So we believe we were successful. We believe we got to where we are because we're a great leader. And I can tell you after looking behind the curtains with over 100 companies, that's not the case. There are a lot of things that we do as leaders that actually are constrained to the business, creates a lid to the business, creates a lid to the people, actually makes our jobs and everybody else's harder in spite of the results.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I could see that, and being in the Young Presidents Organization, a lot of honest conversations with different people over the last decade plus, where people do realize it. Even though they're having success, they're second guessing themselves all the time. There's a lot of imposter syndrome out there, like, oh, why am I not more like this person, or that company looks like it runs better, or their people look happier than mine, or what am I doing wrong? What could I do better? And so I think everybody, maybe they're hiding it pretty well, but everybody kind of has that underneath the surface. But so talk about some of the challenges you see that most executives struggle with. I mean, what are some of the areas that they struggle in, and give us some advice as to how they can maybe address some of those areas.
So first of all, look at the symptoms, because at the end of the day, if you're involved in too many decisions and you're in too many meetings, there's a problem, right? And often we think the problem is the people reporting to us, but we don't realize how, when they're coming in our office, how much of that we caused. So we're creating dependency on us.
Interesting.
So let's step back for a second. If you go back to my career, after I had my realization, I realized that I wasn't successful because I had better strategies, that I was smarter than anybody else. I was just working 3 times harder than everybody else.
Sure.
And what I had to be honest with is I was essentially a hero. If you go back to the companies in my roles, when things happen, it's not because of, carrying armies. It was because I carried a lot of weight. And then you kind of lose because at some point you start realizing I am carrying way too much weight.
And I think it's impossible to scale, really truly scale a business and grow people if you hold on to everything and you don't let anybody else make decisions or really truly lead because they feel like they have to come to you for everything, right? And there is definitely a problem when people think they're the only ones that can do something well, or they do it better than everybody else, and then the people around them will never grow because they'll never have a chance to do those things if you don't let them, right? And so it's kind of an interesting. It's a conundrum though, because you want to get it right, and you want if you believe that you're the best person to do something, then it's hard to break out of that mode.
So here's a dirty little secret. As I look at everybody and I look in the mirror, we all at some point, and may still be, addicted to being the hero. We like being the person with the answer, right? We like bringing the solutions. We like getting things done. We like to say, hey, I put my stamp on this, but that is the death of it.
You caught me. I like that. No, it's a really interesting concept because I think we're also looking for our own self-validation, right? It's like, I went back, that term imposter syndrome. It's like you still want to know that you have it, right? You still want to know you can do it, right? But to truly grow, you have to put trust in other people, right? And then they have to trust you, right? So let's talk about that a little bit.
We talk about culture all the time, and we talk about operating systems like EOS and scaling up and all of that. But when you really get down to the root, the companies that can get massive quickly, the companies that do really, really well, actually hopefully have built an operating system built around trust. So one of our core values in our firm, and I believe in deeply, is trust is everything. Before we decide, speak, or act, is this going to elevate everyone's trust or is it going to take it back? And regardless of who you read, you're going to know that if trust goes down, what happens to cost?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I read one of the books you recommended, The Speed of Trust, and I've quoted it a lot in my meetings with my team because it talks in that book about making deposits and making withdrawals. If you're making too many trust withdrawals, right,
Yeah.
you're gonna empty that bank account, right?
Yeah. So when trust goes down, cost goes up. When trust goes down, speed slows down. Right. So if you really want to scale, you want to do something massive, we got to do that. Now, this is great in concept. You remember how hard that book was to
Yeah.
read, how
Oh my
long it
gosh,
is, and
crazy.
all the different facets? You can screw up trust in so many different ways, and you don't even realize it.
So trust. So when you're building your teams, when you're trying to attract new talent to your team, when you're trying to elevate people in the organization, you're saying the key ingredient, the secret sauce that drives all of that is trust.
Yeah, and you can boil that down just a few things, just to share something for everybody listening.
Sure.
So think about it this way: if I don't have clarity, can you trust me? And if I don't have clarity, can I trust you?
Right.
So
Right.
clarity is probably one of the biggest things missing in organizations. So I challenge every leader to be a heat-seeking missile for ambiguity. Where is it just a little unclear, not sharp, not critically clear?
Interesting.
And the more you can raise clarity, you can then hand the keys over, because now they don't have to read your mind. They don't have to guess. You don't have to guess what's in their head. You can move forward. So if you want one power play, it's figure out where you don't have clarity, figure out where you can raise clarity, and then get the hell out of people's way.
And then clarity, I would kind of take to another level, thinking of the word alignment, right? Because I think sometimes lack of clarity, right, creates a lack of alignment. And then people are going in different directions when they should all be pulling in the same direction, right? And sometimes they're pulling against each other, which I think is challenging, right? And we're not getting where we want to go, but we're not aligned on where we're supposed to be going.
And then there's probably two other, because there's a number, but there's two other things if you want to think about trust. If you want to destroy it, the first one, so we're going to figure out how great a leader we are when things go wrong. We missed the numbers. We pissed off a customer. Something didn't go right. How we respond when things go wrong defines whether people can trust us as a leader. Are we going to be curious to understand, and are we there behind them, lifting them up when it goes down? Are we dragging them down, blaming them, pushing them, raising our voice, demeaning them, making them look bad in front of other people?
So yeah, it's really interesting. We tried at StevenDouglas, one of our goals, in Steve's words, and I've tried to reinforce them over the years, is to be a supportive and encouraging environment, right? And when people are down or something goes wrong or somebody makes a mistake, recognizing that they're humans, that we're all human, we're going to make mistakes. It's not always going to go right. And are you lifting people up and helping them get to the other side and learning from it? Or are you just beating them down, and demeaning them?
Companies don't do anything, people do. Leaders do. So when it goes wrong, we got to look in the mirror, right? And we usually don't. We're usually looking out there to find out who's guilty and all of that. And I think that's really important. The other thing is a lot of us are visionaries. I'm not an operator. I'm more strategist. I'm always looking out. And the problem for everybody that follows us, this gets back to trust, is if they can't see, if they think our ideas are half-cocked, and there's not enough substance, they don't trust us as a leader that they should even follow us there. And we have to close that gap to help them see that. We've thought this out. This is not just some wild, like a lot of leaders are just like, I want to be $1 billion of revenue. That's great. That's not a plan. That's not thought out. Yeah, it's possible. But they're all looking at us like, how the hell is that going to happen?
Well, and sometimes they're even wondering, why is that even good for them, right? It's like, okay, well, that sounds great, but does that help our customer? Does that help me grow? Does that help the team grow? Or is it just exciting to have $1 billion in revenue? And I think look, I wind up hearing that people are wondering why we did this, why we did that, and once I get a chance, an audience, to explain to them, what we were thinking, why we're doing it, typically they'll say, oh, okay, now I get it. And then I think to myself, gosh, that was a miss. I probably should have told everybody while I was doing it why we were doing it and why it was going to help, kind of move us forward. That gets people bought in and excited about being on that journey and kind of taking that path. And so communication is absolutely critical. When I think about culture and buy-in and people being aligned, that communication aspect is so absolutely critical, and we miss it a lot of times. And we think we're good communicators, but we miss it all the time. And I'll find out that I left somebody a certain way, and later on from somebody else who they entrusted, and I'll say, wow, how did I totally miss on that conversation? Like, I really thought I got across, what I thought I got across, and I absolutely did not. And so I think there's a lot of that happening. The good news is there's a feedback loop for me. I've got some folks that have been with me 10, 15, 20, been with the company longer than me. That the loop comes back, and I realize when I'm making mistakes or really missing the mark.
You just dropped a golden nugget that I hope nobody missed. It's the word why.
Yeah.
So we often give people things to do, but we don't tell them why. They don't understand why. And so they go through the tasks, the actions, and then they produce something, but it's not what we were expecting. It's because they weren't crystal clear on why they were doing what they were doing in the business. Their why was, is Matt came to them and said, I want this done.
Yeah, you told me I have to, and that's why I'm doing it. Yeah. And then how passionate are they about and the process, and how excited are they about going about it? If they're just wondering, like, why am I even doing this? This doesn't make any sense. It's not a good use of time. So it's kind of interesting to think about that. And talk a little bit about hiring challenges. I mean, what do you think some of the bigger hiring challenges are? Again, you work with all different size companies across the country, across all these different industries, but there's commonalities. What would be like one of the biggest hiring challenges for building a company and scaling a company?
So let me think about this, and because I think there's 3 steps. I'm going through this with a client right now. So being very, very clear on, because let's say, for example, I need a controller. All right, you guys place a lot of controllers. But a controller in one company is very different in the skill sets I need in another company, depending on the size, the complexity, what's going on. So the number one reason I think people are frustrated is they have not clearly defined the position profile, the ideal person for what we need today in this company. And because of that, they just get enamored with resumes.
Right.
And it may not track with what I need. So I think the number one problem is really understanding what do we need in our structure today for our company. And then the second thing that we do I think we get wrong is now they've interviewed people and people connect sound bites, but they don't trust but verify. And they don't go and do reference interviews to actually see what was said, actually got done. And so then they're like, we got hoodwinked. I'm like, well, because you just took whatever somebody told you and you said, all right, that's the truth. And let's be honest, when they're interviewing, it's only partly the truth. It's what they want you to hear, and what you have a responsibility to do, even if you hire that person, is find out the other side. So we've got a situation right now where a client's going to hire somebody. They're not an ideal fit. In some ways they are. In other situations, I think they're not perfect. It doesn't mean they can't do the job, but if you now don't create an onboarding process, an environment where that person's going to be successful, they're going to flop. And in one case, I can see right now where the CEO's style doesn't match with the behavioral profile. So the person has the resume,
yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. So first you have to identify really what it is you need in your company for that role. Forget about the title, right? Create a job spec around your company's role, because a lot of times you'll hear, oh, well, my friend, he's only paying this much for his controller, right? For an example. And it's like, yeah, but his company's completely different. The skill set's different. The team's different. The systems are different. The industry's different. It's like, how do you think you're going to pay the same amount as this other person, right? And so it's first defining it, making sure everybody who's interviewing really understands what we need this person to be good at. Mm-hmm. Right. And also what types of, what's the fit, right? Because there's the big part, I think, in any role, regardless of title and level, is that DNA fit. And, you hit on it. Talk about that, the fit with the person who reports to, the fit with the CEO, the fit with the environment, forgetting about skill set. I mean, that's the part I think a lot of companies miss.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, so we might hire an A player, but not for our company.
Interesting.
Right. And then we'll blame them because they failed, but we actually put the wrong person in the wrong organization. So, and I've seen people go from one client to another client, and it's not because we had anything to do with it. A player over here, C player over there. And a lot of it had to do with a different culture, different set of circumstances, and they were good here, but not ideal for over there.
Right. And look, you could be good when a company's growing, but not good in a turnaround, right? I mean, they're different situations, right? And so organic growth is different than acquisitive growth. We talked about, a little bit about the secret sauce being trust. What would be the biggest advice you would tell any leader that's struggling to get their footing, whether it's strategy, execution, people, cash issues? Like how do you start? Because you go into all these companies with all different, I'll call it challenges and opportunities, right? Clearly things, I mean, if they could afford you, probably some things are going right. But there's probably a lot more to be done. And every situation you go into is different. So how do you get started in those situations? And then, what do you see as kind of general advice you could give to somebody?
So for me, when things are going wrong or they're going well and we want to figure out how to sustain it, the one thing I would say, so most of us, I know for me for sure, I want to move fast. I want to be decisive. When something's going wrong, I want to fix it like yesterday, and we're impatient. And I think the number one secret I learned from now being on this side is you have to stop and slow down first. So there's a saying out there that when you're in the bottle, you can't read the label.
Interesting. Oh, I like that one. When you're in the bottle, you can't read the label. And when you're in the thick of it in your business, right, sometimes you can't step back and see what the issues and challenges are.
As what I realized was when I stepped back and I pulled myself outside of the bottle for a second and I really looked at what was going on, I'd be like, oh my God, I didn't see it. But if I moved too fast, I never stepped back. And so when you step back, you can really see clearly what's going on. And then when you step back, don't look at symptoms, look for patterns, and then keep going for the root cause. So often we're like, this is a people problem, right? So I just need to replace this person that's going to solve it.
Right.
Or I'm going to fix this process, or I'm going to buy this software.
Right.
These are usually not really what the problem is. And so you need to go really deep and ask yourself, what is it I'm really wanting to change? And then what are all of the contributors to it so that you can address it holistically?
Right.
Now, it does help to have a blind spot. I'm a professional blind spot remover.
Right.
Because basically we're brought in as consultants and coaches to help hold up the mirror for what you just won't allow yourself to see. Usually when we hold up the mirror, everyone's like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And by the way, it doesn't have to be an outside consultant that you're paying. It could be being a part of EO or YPO or Vistage or one of these groups. There's all different ways of getting feedback, right? And sometimes it's a task force within your company, right? It's having good open dialogue with your leaders. Sometimes it's 360 reviews, right, where you're getting real feedback internally. There's so many different ways, right, to get feedback and realize that, oh, wait a second, I didn't realize that about myself or my company or this department. And again, we too quickly sometimes we think we replace a person, the problem solved, when a lot of times it's the system around the person that's the problem, right? And so it's really fascinating. But look, these were all really, really good lessons. Anything else you want to add that we didn't touch on that kind of comes to mind? I think we covered a lot here.
I think we covered, the essence without getting into any more longer stories.
Yeah, no, it seems like
I think we covered a lot of ground.
I think we could go a lot longer because there's so many learnings here, and we do this all the time. It's we get into these philosophical conversations, but I do want to thank you for being here. Thank you for everyone for listening today. We hope that this podcast is bringing some real take-home value for you guys as you're all kind of going through and trying to build your businesses and get through all these challenges. Please follow us. We obviously we've got the StevenDouglas website. We're on LinkedIn. This is on YouTube, and we hope you guys follow, like it, share it with your friends, and we hope to see you next time.